people stepping on human mice. Human mice? Mice that are humans. Mice with human souls, and they're getting stepped on. Hold on, let me try to explain this right. Hi everyone, I'm Nina Kaskar, or Ms. Scarlet in the Study, and welcome to another episode of Blinded by Nostalgia. So if you don't know already, Blinded by Nostalgia is a series that lives on my channel here, where I take TV, movies, games, and just entertainment that I enjoyed as a kid and review it now as an adult. So today's topic, if you have not already read the title, is The Witches, which was a Jim Henson movie from 1990. I was terrified of this movie as a child, but I still loved it. I felt like a cool kid watching a scary movie at age 8. So if you are equally terrified by this movie, or you have a special place in your heart for it, we're gonna get into the review and I will let you know if you and I are blinded by nostalgia. So first off, The Witches was a story written by Roald Dahl, which was one of my favorite authors as a kid. I loved The Witches, Matilda, the BFG, James and the Giant Peach. That's just to name a few of them. They're great fantasy books. As a kid, I loved just exploring a whole different world, and it was fantastic. The Witches book was not as terrifying to me as the movie. The movie literally scared the crap out of me, and for good reason. It's terrifying to watch as a child. I feel watching it now, it's a little ridiculous, but I can see 8-year-old me literally crying behind a couch, not wanting to look at these terrible witches. What about the plot of sweet old women trying to lure children to their deaths is not terrifying for a child? It's the exact same fear level as the scene from Pinocchio where all the kids turn into donkeys. Now I really wonder why people make these terrifying movies for children. So the movie starts off with the main character, Luke's grandmother, telling him a story about how the witches kidnapped a girl in her town and the girl got trapped in a painting. This scene, this whole opening bit of the movie is terrifying. And I really thought I'd be over it now, like over 10 years later. No, it's still terrifying. How would you feel if some random woman came up to you, grabbed you in an alleyway, and then put you in a painting where you would have to live the rest of your days as a picture? This is the least graphic part of the entire movie, but it is the most chilling and terrifying moment you will experience watching this. The grandmother's friend was kidnapped by witches, and the witches then put her in a painting where her parents had to talk to her through the painting, and she lived until she grew old and eventually died or withered away in the painting. That's terrifying. So the grandmother tells Luke that the witches have certain attributes that you need to look out for as a child so that you do not get kidnapped and trapped in a painting like her friend did. So basically, if you see a woman, make sure they don't have purple eyes, tacky shoes, or a possible wig, because that might mean they're a witch and might want to kidnap you if you were a child. Luckily, I'm an adult now and can't get kidnapped by witches, so thank goodness. So Luke now encounters a woman who comes up to him while he's in his treehouse. She offers him chocolate and a snake. I'm sorry, but even if she wasn't a witch, would you go up to a random woman with chocolate and a snake? Maybe I was just a kid that followed the rules, but I never would have gone up to a stranger and taken chocolate from them. Or a snake. So now I'm thinking the witches are actually a metaphor for creepy strangers and pedophiles. I'm not quite sure. So this woman comes strolling up with her chocolate and her snake, but Luke is too smart to take that bait, so he calls for his grandma and the woman runs away. But there's our first encounter with an actual witch in this situation of the story. So all the witches are now at a hotel for their annual meeting to discuss murdering children. And somehow Grandma and Luke end up in the same hotel that week. So I'll fast forward now to the part that most of you probably remember from this movie. The part that just terrified you to your core, the part that never made you want to leave the house ever again, the part that made you be very wary of all adult women. So the witches go into their meeting room, they lock the doors in, and they all are instructed to now take off their wigs and kick off their ugly shoes and be their true selves, which is great body image promotion for the witches. I appreciate that. The Grand High Witch now takes off her mask and has a completely different face which I'm not entirely sure why she's the only one with a mask on. Everyone else seems to be pretty normal looking, and then you get her face, which is instilled in my brain as one of those scary images that you just think of at night from your childhood, like, oh yeah, that time I peed my pants at school. That time I told my waiter, yeah, you too, when he told me to enjoy my meal. Grant I witch. Watching it now, it's a little over the top. I think it is. I remember the illustrations in the book were not as terrifying as this mask. And if you look at the rest of the witches, they all have pretty natural faces. I want to talk about the mask as well as the makeup and the wigs that are used in the scene as well as throughout the rest of the movie. It could just be the age gap and that it hasn't aged very well, but you can see all the bald caps on all of the witches that take off their wigs. You can see that they're wearing skull caps. You can see all the makeup that's sitting on their hairline. You can see all the prosthetics that are put into making these witches look like witches. And it kind of takes away from the viewing experience. I know watching it this time around, I felt very distracted by their makeup and the prosthetics because it looked so fake. Something that just makes the quality of the movie drop a little bit. As a kid, you're just so absorbed into the story that you don't really notice these things, but now as an adult, I'm not really paying attention to the story because I'm distracted by Wendy's bald cap not sticking to her head. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. And while we're talking about makeup and prosthetics, the movie, when it opens, the grandmother talks about how she lost a finger to one of the witches, and like she shows her finger and it looks like this. It's missing. And when I was watching the first scene, I thought maybe they had done really good makeup, a prosthetic on. In subsequent scenes, you see the actress actually holding her finger in, and you see her finger, which I think breaks the illusion a little bit. So what I had thought was a prosthetic on her finger was just her holding in her pinky, which now I'm realizing is actually quite difficult. Can anyone just hold their pinky in? Like, what? My hand can't do it. Hello? Okay, I'm sorry. Props to the actress that held her pinky in like that instead of using a prosthetic. Before I go on to more criticisms about this, I just want to point out here that Rowan Atkinson is a gem to society, and I love him, and he's amazing in this movie, and he made me giggle, and it was all the great feelings to see Rowan Atkinson on screen. I completely forgot he was in this movie, and it's perfect. He's my favorite part of the movie now, watching it again. So back to the story. The witches have a poison that they're going to put on chocolate that turns children into mice, and then they can now exterminate the mice, therefore exterminating all the children in the world. Okay, so Luke is in the room when all the witches are talking about this, and he gets to see Bruno get turned into a mouse, and then subsequently he gets turned into a mouse by the witches, and now the two mice are running free throughout the hotel, trying not to get killed. So now we get into the next part of the movie, where Luke and Bruno, as mice, are running throughout the hotel, trying to get help, trying to save each other, I don't really know, they didn't really have a plan. It looked like Luke was perfectly fine being a mouse, and good for him. The mouse puppets are not great. I've had a hard time watching it and losing a little bit of interest in it after the witches weren't really a part of the movie anymore. It was really just Luke and Bruno running around, obviously Bruno being there for comic relief, not really being that funny, and I felt like the last hour of this movie dragged a little bit, specifically just because of that. I feel like it's something that as a child I thought was cool, but watching it now, it just looks old, it's not entertaining. So eventually chaos ensues, and now adults are turning into mice, and mice are putting poison in food, and the witches are eating food and turning into mice, and it's whole chaotic. I felt like this last 30 minutes of this movie are very fast, and things are just happening, and people are turning into mice, and people are getting killed, and this is very violent for a children's movie. I'm talking about straight up people stepping on human mice. Human mice? Mice that are humans. Mice with human souls, and they're getting stepped on. Hold on, let me try to explain this right. So if you are turned into a mouse and you get stepped on and like you spurt out like ooze, so it's a whole bunch of humans killing mice with human souls, and it's very violent. It's extremely violent. This is probably the part where I was like snapped back into the movie because it just seemed like a lot of stepping on things, and it was kind of scary because they're humans, and how many people died in this movie? If someone knows the actual kill count for this movie, let me know, because this is terrifying. Okay, so after the whole killing spree of witches and mice and humans and what have you, Luke and Bruno now live out their lives as mice? This doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay. So Bruno goes home with his parents as a mouse. Luke goes back to live with his grandmother as a mouse. We flash forward and Luke is now, you know, in his little train, running around the house as a mouse, living his best life. He tells his grandmother at the end that he wants to be a mouse, he likes being a mouse, and he lives in his, like, tiny little cage. It's great. It's a great way to raise grandchildren. Just turn them into mice and stick them in a cage. This movie is so weird. One of the witches that didn't get murdered in the whole mouse killing debacle comes to the house and turns Luke back into a human right after he says he wants to be a mouse. So I would be furious if I was enjoying my mouse life and someone just turned me back into a human with responsibilities. I would be so upset. But apparently he takes it very well, and I keep saying that things are terrifying, but I didn't realize how terrifying this scene was. So Luke grows in his cage and then breaks it free, naked, and we get this beautiful image of him flying across the room, his blurred naked body just... Is this okay for children to watch? I don't... What even is this movie? Okay, so then naked Luke yells at the witch to go get Bruno too and make sure Bruno turns into a human. I'm so glad we don't have to see Bruno being naked jumping out of a cage either. It's great. And that's the end. That's the movie. That's the movie. It's that wonderful time of the episode where I decide whether we are blinded by nostalgia or not. So if you love The Witches, if you thought The Witches was a great movie, you may possibly be blinded by nostalgia. I actually encourage all of you who enjoyed this movie as a kid to watch it now. It's extremely dated. And that's the only thing it is. It's not a bad movie, it's just, it's not aged well. And since I'm reviewing it unbiased by time or nostalgia, I'm gonna have to say I'm blinded by nostalgia just a little bit. I was really on the fence about this because it's not a bad movie. But my opinion of it as a child is so completely different to my opinion of it now. I feel like the first half of the movie is actually brilliantly done. It's, that whole story building is great. The story is great. And even though I'm saying we're blinded by nostalgia and it's not that fantastic of a movie, I think it's a great nostalgic film. But if I'm reviewing it totally unbiased, I don't think it holds up. I don't think it's something that children are gonna watch nowadays. I know that kids now are watching much scarier things than I did as a kid, just because we've so advanced in movie making technology and things that we can do and things that entertain us. We've advanced so far so quickly that this movie did not age very well. The parts that I used to cower behind the couch for, I now laugh at because it's a little silly, but it's still a good time. I will say that I'm not sure that the movie ever at any point hit the mark on who their audience was. Because I feel like as a child, this movie was still a little too scary for me, and as an adult, I feel like I'm not interested in it. There's a weird in-between age gap that would probably really appreciate it, but I don't see anyone younger than 8 watching this or older than 13. I think I was probably a little too young when I watched it and was scared of it, and now that I'm watching it now, I'm too old to enjoy it. I don't know. You let me know what you think. If you've rewatched it recently or if you had thoughts on it, please let me know what you think, because I'm a little bit on the fence as to whether we are actually blinded by nostalgia or not. I'm going to say we are for right now, but if you want to change my mind, change my mind. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit subscribe. I put out a new video every Wednesday, and you don't want to miss out on the rest of the Blinded by Nostalgia series. If you have a favorite TV show, game, movie, any form of entertainment that you enjoyed as a kid, leave it in the comments below and I might review it to tell you whether you are blinded by nostalgia or not. I hope you have a great rest of your day, my lovely people, and I will see you next week.
Don't forget